Do we have a controversy at the quarterback position in Iowa City? Brendan Sullivan against the incumbent, Cade McNamara. Where does Marco Lainez fit? Today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, on the heels of Big Ten football media days, we will hear from Eliot Clough from the Hawkeye rival site, HawkeyeBeacon.com. He's going to join us here coming up in just a few moments. But before that, a interesting storyline that developed, and the question is this going to be a real competition at the quarterback position going into August camp for Iowa football? Cade McNamara, an injury-plagued season a year ago, ending in the ACL tear against Michigan State. Very limited throughout the course of the year. And that was one thing that Brian Ferentz mentioned during Big Ten media days, is we didn't get to see a healthy Cade McNamara. In fact, we've never seen a healthy Cade McNamara. Now, yes, we're only talking about a handful of games from a year ago, but the injury that he sustained, that quad injury back in August camp at the open practice on Kids Day, was substantial. As we told you leading into the first game of the year, it was touch and go. He was going to make it a go, but the knowledge inside the program is that he was not even close to 100%. And we never got to see that guy. You think of one of the plays, he had the run against Penn State when everybody was covered down the field and went there, and you could just see how gimpy he was. Iowa wasn't able to do quarterback sneaks. Iowa wasn't able to do a big complement of their offense a year ago. And we can argue the merits of that offense, and I think it's a valid conversation with the former offensive coordinator there. However, when you go through and you look at the way that they were built, the way that they want to do things, and not having a guy that can push off, that doesn't have, because of that leg injury, the ability to do a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 1, to go up there and go quick. Even 5 and 7 step drops or the play action game was incredibly limited because of his limitations physically a year ago when he was out there. When he was out there, it wasn't good. I mean, there's no two ways about it. 46 of 90 passing, 51.1% completion percentage. This is a guy that completed 60% of his passes both years at Michigan. This was not the same guy. 4 touchdowns against 3 interceptions, a long of 36 yards. That was in the first play. A quarterback rating of 106.2 in the college scale. That's absolutely brutal. And he was sacked 8 times on top of it. 5.6 yards per attempt. This was not Cade McNamara. If your expectations are the guy that you saw last September is the guy that I was getting this year, or the guy that they're going to have this season, I think you're dead wrong. This is not to paint Cade McNamara as the next Heisman Trophy winner. This is not to anticipate that he's going to throw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns this year. I don't think that's the case either. I think we need to temper those expectations. This is definitely a both sides argument. I think there's one faction that goes too far with their love of Cade McNamara. There's the other side that thinks he's an absolute bum. And he's not a bum. This is, at minimum, a competent quarterback. They didn't have a competent quarterback for the final 2 months last year. And it leads to the conversation, will this be a real quarterback controversy, or are we talking about something where this is going to be Cade McNamara's job? Brendan Sullivan will eventually become the backup. He's listed at number 3 in the initial depth chart. What do they do with Marco Lainez? Is it an ability that they still think that they can develop him? They think that he can push himself for the starting job next year in 2025. Sullivan will be around for another season, him and Lainez battling, and then the newcomers at the quarterback position coming in. Is that what they're doing? Are they going to be looking at the portal again? Those are conversations, obviously, for the offseason. Brian Ferentz said it, and I think it goes without saying. If you follow this program to any degree, and certainly if you're listening to this program, I'm going to guess that you do, you know that positions aren't given. They just aren't. I can feel that way, I know, at times. That incumbent is incredibly difficult to beat out. And that is true. And maybe more difficult than other programs that are out there. Look, if you put in the sweat equity, you put in the work, you've done all the right things, and you've got playing time and played even at a decent level, you've earned a lot in the world of Brian Ferentz. We know that. We've seen players, though, that have been upended. In fact, we saw one on the opening depth chart with John Nestor being listed over Deshaun Lee, who did a lot for Iowa's football team last year. The suspensions early in the season for Jamari Harris, the injuries to Cooper DeJean, he was thrust in there. He was ready to go, but it's not his job, at least at this point in time, according to the depth chart, and that's what you get. Cade McNamara is going to be your starter. Now, Brendan Sullivan, when you look at the statistical profile of him at Northwestern, it's really good. Last season, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Those for 714 yards, 63.6% completion percentage. The year before, 74% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns against 3 interceptions. But talking to some people that have seen Brendan Sullivan, the gap between him and Cade McNamara, at least as a thrower, is significant. Knowledge of the system, obviously McNamara has the leg up there. Doing it at a high level for a longer time, McNamara has that. The equity inside the program, being here a year, McNamara has that. But as a passer, it's not particularly close. Again, you look at those statistical numbers, they paint a different picture than really the kind of quarterback he is. Sullivan, much better runner. Physical, big dude, 6'4", 220 pounds. He's got the size, the physicality, and he'll put his head down, and he will lay in there, and he will make a play with his legs, something you don't see out of Cade McNamara. And certainly at this point, coming off an ACL tear, that's not the expectation for him. A controversy, though, no, can't go there. Cade McNamara will be your starter at game 1. Our starter coming up is going to be Eliot Clough from the rival site. It's HawkeyeBeacon.com, joining us as he made his way back from Indianapolis. Conversation with Eliot Clough, talking a lot of Iowa football. It's a football-heavy episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Stay right there as we continue here in a moment. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and it makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Love that. Maybe you're milling around, making your way to a Major League city. Maybe you live in a Major League city. I want to go to a Twins game, a Cubs, a White Sox, Brewers, Royals, whatever it may be. They got you covered, and you can just watch those prices go down as you're sitting there, maybe having a cold one before everything is ready to go. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. How about this? Last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. That's right. This is not just for sports. Game Time has you covered with a whole lot more. And my favorite, the all-in pricing, showing exactly what your total is going to be up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Always appreciate the time of all of our great guests here on the Iowa Beat on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Eliot doing some great work over on the rival side of things. Brian Ferentz has a new job, and we heard about it at Big Ten Football Media Day. He's with the Terps. Iowa faces the Terps. A little intrigue there as we come back. Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Here across the Locked On Network, it is your team every day. We have you covered. Your favorite NFL team as training camps have started up. MLB is we're in the heart of the season. NBA, NHL offseason. We have you covered with your team. And not just that, we have our national shows, Locked On Big Ten, Locked On College Football, Locked On College Hoops, Locked On Women's Hoops, you name it, we got it here on the Locked On Network, and appreciate you being here with us. Well, Brian Ferentz has a new job, as we talked about a few weeks back. He is now helping out at Maryland. And hearing Mike Locksley, talk about his respect of the Ferentz family. Look, we can make jokes, we can scoff, and we've done plenty of that over the last few years. He was in over his head, and there was no counterpunch to Brian Ferentz. We saw scripted plays, pretty good. in the heart of a game, not great. But in the role that he now has at Maryland, this is probably the right spot. As an offensive line coach, he has proven to be a good coach. As a tight end coach, he had a lot of talent in New England, but at minimum, you can say he proved to be a good coach there. Yes, talent helps. But what he did putting together an offense, being the head of the offensive staff, he wasn't good enough. It's as simple as that. And when the Maryland game comes up later this season, there's going to be a lot of articles, a lot of ink spilled, and I'm sure conversations right here on Locked On Hawkeyes about it. I think everybody that's listened every day, as you know, my opinion of Brian Ferentz as an offensive coordinator. It's not real high. It wasn't personal. It wasn't anything like that. To me, it was about him. And in a way, how he handcuffed this Iowa football program. That's where my frustrations lied. It's not him as a person. It was him as an offensive coordinator. And did that taint my view? And was I maybe too hard at times? You can make that argument. I disagree, but I understand that vantage point. The good news is for us, that is gone. We do not have to worry about the nepotism and the other angles here. It is over. Brian Ferentz now at Maryland. With that, we will be back with you tomorrow for another edition of Locked On Hawkeyes. We continue our preview of the Iowa football position groups. We've done quarterback. We've done defensive line. We still got a lot more to go. Busy one coming up here for you on a Friday edition. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.